everyone, I am Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan Classes Funda Clear. So today I am going to explain the last chapter of our Class 10th Political Science, the 8th chapter of the Political Science of Class 10th, and the chapter that we have got here is Challenges of Democracy. So challenges of democracy. So as all of you know that we have been on a tour of democracy till 9th class of political science. You know that in the political science of class 9th, well, you have been discussing, you have been studying about democracy, about political science from class 6 and in class 7, in class 8 as well. But we had a kind of tour that was started in class 9th as it was about, you know, that even the title of the books are the same. So this is a kind of a tour of democracy that was started in class 9th political science, and now we have come to an end of this tour of democracy. But before concluding this tour of democracy, we must see about the challenges of democracy. We must study this chapter so as to address the fundamental questions related to democratic politics. That is, what are the challenges that a democracy faces and what can be done about it? What can be done about those challenges? Well, in this chapter there aren't answers to these questions about challenges, but yeah, in this chapter there are suggestions that are given in this chapter about the challenges that are faced by democracy in India and elsewhere, and after that you can make your own suggestions for reforms in our country and elsewhere as well, and about a good definition of a good democracy that we'll study in this chapter. So that is what we are going to discuss in this chapter, and without any further ado, let's get started with our first topic, that is thinking about challenges. So thinking about challenges. Now, as all of you know that we kind of, in previous chapters of this book, we saw that democracy, there are many countries which are democratic, who have adopted a democratic form of government. Even more than 100 countries are there. But if you look at the globe of 2000, the political map of 2000, then you will see that even today there is around 1/4 of the whole world is still not democratic. Well, you know what, that in different countries, in different parts of the world, there can be different challenges faced by a democracy, and as a democracy is dominant all over the world, we have seen that there are many countries which are democratic form of government, and as democracy is very dominant, that is why it does not have a challenger or a rival in its arena. But if it doesn't have a challenger, that doesn't mean that it is not challenged by the people. You know what, that challenge does not just mean a kind of challenge. We say challenge that can be overcome by anyone, and if we have overcome any challenge, then those challenges are meant for progress. So if we have overcome any challenge, then we are at a higher level than before. So challenge is a kind of difficulty that helps you to progress if you have overcome it, and that is what we call challenges, and that can be seen in democratic politics as well. Well, democratic politics does not have a rival or a challenger, but that does not mean that it isn't challenged by the people. It is challenged by many critics, but you know what, that if it overcomes all those challenges, then it is more powerful. The democratic form of government becomes more powerful, and the challenges that are faced by all the democracies aren't just one challenge or one type of challenge. There can be 3 types of major challenges in many parts, in all the parts of the world. Now, first could be the foundational challenge of democracy, the foundational problem of democracy. That is, countries like Pakistan faces this kind of challenge. You know what, that there are still many countries, about 1/4, about 25%, who are not kind of democratic form of government, who have not adopted a democratic form of government, and that can be called as foundational problem of democracy. That are even a democracy that have been established, that can be seen in Pakistan countries. So we can say that those countries that don't have a democratic form of government, that haven't adopted any democratic form of government, can be called as the challenge could be as a foundational challenge. Well, in those countries, what is needed to be done is that give more power to institutions and remove the military power in that country. And that is what we can see in Pakistan. There is a lot of military power in Pakistan, and that is why it could be that it is the foundational challenge in Pakistan. After that, there is a problem, there is a challenge of expansion of democracy. That is, countries, most established democracies faces this kind of challenge. Countries like USA or even our country India face this kind of challenge. You know that even from the name you can say that what this challenge means. The challenge of expansion, that is applying all the basic principles of democratic form of government of a democracy in that country, and that is what we call as a challenge of expansion. You know that ensuring power to the institutions, inclusion of women and minority falls under this challenge. So we can say that there should be more basic principles applied to the country so that it can overcome this kind of challenge. Now, third and last challenge, that type of challenge we can say that is of the that deepening of democracy. Deepening of democracy means that giving more power to the institutions. In many countries, it can be seen. In all the democracies, it can be seen that in one form or another form there is a problem, there is a challenge of democracy, of deepening of democracy, and that is why we can say that the expansion of democracy means that you have to expand the democracy to all the regions, to deal with all the social divisions, to differentiate to all the social groups and to all the regions equally, ensuring more power to the federal units, to the local government. That means, but in deepening of democracy, it means that you have to give more power to the institutions than just in one hand. So we can say that in deepening of democracy, there should be less contribution of rich people in the governmental decision, and this kind of challenge is faced in all the democracies in one form or another. It can be seen everywhere in our country, in US, in everywhere we can say that in one form or another. Now, these three challenges, that is the foundational challenge, the expansion of democracy, and the deepening of democracy, you can learn it as just that you have sowed a seed in the soil, and after that it germinates, it becomes a plant, and after that its roots get deepening and its root deepens in the soil. That can be seen in these three challenges. First, you have the seed that has to be sowed in the soil, that is, you have to make foundation of democracy. After that, you have to expand it. As the plant gets bigger, it expands in more area, it gets leaves, it gets more branches and those things. So we can say that is the expansion of democracy, and after that comes the point of roots. The roots start deepening the soil. So we can say that can be the third challenge of democracy, that is the deepening of democracy. So we can say that these are the three challenges that are faced everywhere in democracy, non-democratic form of government. For democracy, these are the challenges, these are the types of challenges that a democracy faces and everywhere. Now, these can depend, there can be different kind of methods of dealing all the problems in different regions, in different countries, and that is why we cannot say about reform, but yeah, some suggestions about reforms. Now, our next topic that we have got here is different contexts, different challenges. So different contexts, different challenges. You know what, that there can be different contexts with different challenges. Like, for example, in our country, what there can be more seen that corruption in electoral politics. There isn't a free and fair competition in electoral politics, and there is a more and more campaign of money for electoral politics. So we can say that there can be different contexts for the challenges, and in those different contexts there can be different challenges. That is the type of challenge and different types of challenge and different challenge in a country. Like, you know what, that liberals want more gender equality in democracies, but even if we look at the liberal parties, what happens that they are still not choosing women as a candidate for elections. Why is it so? If they are demanding for gender equality, shouldn't they take the first step by themselves? So we can say that can be seen. There are different contexts, like for the transparency of democracy. Well, you have a lot of examples that we have studied in class 9 as well as in previous chapter of this book. So you have to take all the examples of different contexts and of different challenges and then write it down in your notebook. So we can say that if we had talked about the transparency of democracy, and after that electoral politics, the corporate electoral politics, the gender equality, the casteism, the caste inequalities in our country. So there are different contexts of different challenges. Now after that, we have got a lot of countries all over the world with different challenges. Like in USA, we had talked about Guantanamo Bay, that is where many people were present. Why was it so? You have to write down the type of challenge that was faced there. After that, we have an example of Saudi Arabia. Now in Saudi Arabia, there is a gender inequality. Women are not allowed to do work, and you know that there is a system of burqa in Muslim religion. So in Saudi Arabia, there is less gender equality. Well, I would say no gender equality in Saudi Arabia. After that, we have the example of many countries like Poland, where solidarity is banned and now military power is getting more and more. In Pakistan, we saw that General Musharraf, who is the general commander of Pakistan, General Musharraf hold all the referendum, all the power in Pakistan. And we have different examples like in Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia, we saw that there are many conflicts between different ethnic groups, between Albanians and many ethnic groups, and that is why it got divided into different countries. We saw about Sri Lanka as well. In Sri Lanka, there was a situation like, you know, even today there are conflicts in Sri Lanka. We saw that about Tamils and Sinhala speakers of Sri Lanka. So there are many countries all over the world like Bolivia and all the countries like Iraq, Iran, these countries which do have a lot of kind of, you know, that different challenges of different contexts. Even in US, you don't have the civil rights in US. The black of the US do have rights in the US, but still they are poor or homeless, and they have less tendency of employment in US, in the United States of America. So we can say that even US, which claims to be a superpower, does not have equality in it, does not give more civil rights to the blacks. And if we talk about US, then it disregards all the decisions made by the UN, that is the United Nations organization. So it controls the UN. So we can say now that is kind of all the different challenges faced by democracy all over the world. Well, there are a lot of examples that you can add by yourself. After that, we have to discuss about different types of challenges. So different types of challenges. Now we discussed about some countries and we discussed about different contexts with different challenges. But you know what, that we discussed about types of challenges, that is the F and E and D, that is fed. You could say that in short term, in a trick you could say fed. F, that is for foundational challenge, E, that is the challenge of expansion, and for D, deepening of democracy. Now there can be different types of challenges. Those are the major types of challenges, but there can be different contexts of different types of challenges. Like for China, we discussed about, you know, that Communist Party holds all the power of electoral politics, and even if it is adopting all the economical reforms, but it still has monopoly over many companies. And there can be different types of challenges like the working of institutions, the election, the federalism, or the decentralization, or the political reforms, political participation. So these are some of the challenges, different types of challenges that can be for different countries. You know what, that if we talk about China, what is the problem there? That is, there isn't any free fair elections. So we can say that elections there, that is a problem there. After that, there is popular participation of the people. People's participation, that also plays a very important role. And there can be many different types of challenges that you can add by yourself. So we can say that the working of institutions, that is empowering more power, giving more power to the institutions, all the institutions. Well, what are institutions? We have already discussed about it in the previous chapter, in previous class, political science. So we can say that could be different types of challenges for different contexts. Well, we did discuss about the foundational challenge, the deepening of democracy, or the expansion of democracy. But besides that, there are still many types of challenges that can be in any democracy. Now the next topic that we have got here is thinking about political reforms. So thinking about political reforms. Now, if we are talking about the challenges of democracy, then shouldn't we have a political reform, set of political reforms? Now, you might have been thinking that we need a reform in all the democracies, but I'm not going to show a kind of list of undesirable reforms because we cannot get a list of reforms, political reforms in all the countries, the same list for all the countries. Well, you can't repair a car until you know which the car is, which model the car is, what the defect is in the car, what tools are available for you, and where it has broken, and all those things. So we have to know everything about the condition, the situation of the country, the geographical location of the country, the diversity of the country, the people of the country, the social groups of the country, and its relations with other countries. After that, we have to look at all the problems in that country. Thus only we can have a kind of reform list for that country and a kind of a long procedure list for that country. But can we expect at least such a thing that can be applied to all the countries equally, at least for India, for today's context? Now let us think about India. For today's context, the reforms that should be made in India as per the today's context, as per seeing the today's problems, the challenges faced in India by the people. Now in India, the most important things are the laws. No doubt laws are the most important thing in any country, in our country as well, to ban any undesirable act, to ban any undesirable thing in our country. But you know what, that we can't just change the law or can't have an amendment in the law and that will change the situation of the country. Let's take an example of cricket. If there is a change in the LBW rules of cricket, then what would happen? That it would affect the negative tactics of batting, but that would not change the condition of the batting. That would not change the condition of the cricket or the situation of the cricket. For changing the cricket, there was a role of coaches, the administrators, the players. So we can say that for changing the situation of the condition of the that cricket game, then we need to have a change in coaches, administrators, and the players as well. Same happens in the country as well, in a democracy as well. In a democracy, a law is not everything. Well, no doubt it can be that laws are very good for a country. They also make some reforms in a country, but that alone cannot make a change in our country. For doing so, we need political activities, good political activities, and conscious citizens. Political conscious citizens, the parties, the movement groups. So we can say that these are very important for reforms in our country, and that is what should be done in our country. After that, we need to that if there are laws, if there is a change in laws, then we have to look at both points, because in many cases it can be counter-effective, it can be counterproductive. Well, in many cases it has been seen that there is a change in laws, but if it can have a negative effect as well that was not intended by the government. Like for example, in many states, those people have been banned in contesting elections who have more than 2 children, and that it was for a good purpose, but now it has been having more negative effects than good effects. Like more poor people and women are now being denied for contesting in elections. They now can't afford, now can't contest in elections because of this law that was not intended by the government which was making these type of laws. So we can say that a change in the law can have a negative effect as well, and that is why it has to be seen that whether it is a counter-effective or not, it has to be seen by both purposes from all the sides, so as for good reasons. A good example of a good law could be Right to Information Act. Now RTI Act, or the Right to Information Act, was a very good act that helped all the people to stimulate the government. It helps all the people to see all the procedures followed by the government in making any decision and acting as watchdogs for corruption or for the procedures followed by the government, followed by the institutions or any person of political parties, whether he or she has followed the procedures or not. So they help us as acting as a watchdog for the government. So we can say that Right to Information Act is a very good example of those type of laws. After that, we need to reform in our country, and the focus should be on the popular participation in political arena of democratic politics. We can say that more focus should be on the popular participation by the ordinary citizens, that is political participation by the ordinary citizens, so that all the people of our country can have a role in making decisions of our country. They can have a role in political parties, in politics of our country. So we can say that more focus should be on the ordinary citizens, on the political participation of ordinary citizens. After that, we need to have more and more democratic practice in our country. That is, we need to have focus in democratic practice by all the people. So we can say that these are the reforms that can be brought in our country by seeing the today's context. And the next and last thing that we are going to discuss here about reforms in our country is that government must see what it is making. All the decisions should be made after seeing that what the law is, because who will implement it and how. It would not be that legislature will pass the laws, all the laws that are against the legislatures. So we can say that if they are against the interest of MPs or MLAs, then it is obvious, isn't it, that they would not let it be passed in the House assemblies. So we can say that law has to be seen by all the government decisions, by all the major institutions of our country, so has to be seen that whether it will be implemented or not and how it will be implemented. And you know what, in our country, the most acceptable laws are those ones that aren't banning anything but are giving more concessions or rights to the people. You know what, that if the same law is banning something but it would not be acceptable by the people, but if the same law is giving something to that person, you know what, that if it is giving concessions to the people or kind of giving more desirable acts, then it would be acceptable by the people. If it is related to that women gender inequality or related to media, then it is obvious that legislatures would let it pass in the House assemblies. So those can be reforms, methods for reforms in our country. After that, let's take an example. There are many examples of challenges in our country for democracy. You know what is the most important thing that we have to discuss is about doctors' absenteeism. You know what, that absenteeism of doctors is getting more and more in our country. You know that it has been conducted, many surveys have been conducted, and it has been seen in those surveys that what is happening in our country is that all the doctors that have been posted in the rural areas are not cannot be seen in the rural areas. That means that if they are posted in the rural areas in primary healthcare centers, but they are not there, they are not present there, they are absent in the rural areas. They are living in a town or a city, and in that town or a city they are they are continuing their own private business and only visit the rural areas once or twice a month. So people have to go a long distance, people have to travel a long distance for meeting the doctors, and those doctors in cities, those private doctors in cities are taking so much money from those people, from those poor people of rural areas. So we can say that because of doctors' absenteeism, what is happening that more people have to go to the cities for their that health treatment. But for this, even for a little to little health treatments, they have to give more and more money to private doctors. And can there be some suggestions made by you? Well, there can be some suggestions for this. That is that there should be some surprise raids by all the police officers or the administrators of that region, whether to see that those doctors are present in the rural areas or not. After that, there should be it should be made compulsory for all the doctors to be present in the rural areas. If they are not seen in the rural areas, then their service should be terminated. And after that, it should be the kind of responsibility, it should be given the rules, that power should be given to the Gram Sabha or the Panchayat for making an annual report for the presentation, for the that absence or the presentation of that doctor, of all the doctors of rural areas. So we can say that for rural areas there should be some suggestion, there should be some reforms for that. We have given some suggestions for about it. And doctors' absenteeism is getting more and more in rural areas. The next challenge that we have in our country is that political funding. It has been seen that in many elections there are all the candidates in an average level, they have the property of rupees 1 crore or even more than that. So by seeing this, we can say that more and more rich people are only contesting in elections, and they are suppressing the voice, the little voice, the that the poor have in a democracy. Even the little voice of poor in democracy is being suppressed by those rich people. You know what? Political parties are sponsored by very big funding companies, and that is why those funding companies are now having more and more roles in the decision of that political parties. So we can say that it should be, if there are some suggestions, the suggestions for reforms in this context should be done that there should be a report for all the property net worth of each candidate from each party, and that should be examined by the government auditors. After that, it should be that government should donate. Government should encourage people to donate in the political parties, and it should be exempted from the income tax as well. And after that, it should be that government should kind of give funds to the political parties, give some support to the political parties, so that as all the political parties would get some money for the expenditure from the government. So these can be the suggestions for the reforms in this context. So we can say that these are only the suggestions. These are not that I'm giving a kind of list for reforms. These are only the suggestions, and you can also add some if you have some suggestions in this context. After that, what we have to discuss is redefining democracy. Redefining democracy. Now we discuss about the reforms. You know what, that even if we have reform, if you're talking about reform, it does not mean that you have to change all the political leaders of your country. Is it sure that, are you sure that those people who were elected after them would be not corrupted, would not be corrupted? Well, they can be. It is chance that they would be corrupted, they would not be so good. So we can say that even if there is a reform, we need a reform in moral values as well as the prudential values. It is not that we just have to change the political leaders, but it do have some negative effects as well. Now let us discuss about redefining democracy. Now democracy that we discussed, that we started from class 9 political science, the simplest definition of democracy that we discussed in the chapter of class 9 political science, chapter 1, was that democracy is a form of government where rulers are elected by the people. But after that, we saw many properties of democracy, kind of expansion of democracy. We just expanded the definition of democracy to many points that are that democracy provides a free and fair electoral politics, that is elections to all the candidates, and the right should be given to citizens to change those rulers, in any time by constitutions, and that rights should be given to all the citizens. It should be provided to all the citizens of our country, and after that it should be based on constitutional framework and by the civic rights of the people. So we can say that we expand the definition of democracy, we redefined the definition of democracy. But after that, didn't we see many things in this chapter, in this book, in this whole book, and in the last chapter, in the last class? We saw many things in the last class and in this class, but we didn't offend the definition of democracy. We just added more and more things. Like for example, we saw that how democracy deals with this power sharing, how democracy deals with the social differences, social groups, and social divisions and conflicts in our country, and it's very important to raise the voice of minority as well. We also saw that democracy is not just a mere rule of majority. Majority does not mean that majority of religion or ethnic groups or linguistic groups. So we can say that majority, rule by majority does not just mean that in a democracy it is only by the majority. The voice of minority is also as important as the voice of majority in any democracy in our country. And after that, we saw that power sharing, that is a very important element of a democracy, that it is very important, and we saw about local government, the central government, and federalism. We also discussed about decentralization. After that, we came to a conclusion of all this with outcomes of democracy and challenges of democracy. So we can say that from all this that we discussed about democracy, you know what, in class 9th and class 10th, we discussed just all about democracy. democracy, the elements of democracy, the different works that is to be done by the democracy. We discuss about gender, caste and religion. After that, we discuss about power sharing, social differences, social conflicts and social divisions. We shall discuss about different tiers of government and different things that we saw in both classes. And that is what we can say, that we have redefined the democracy, the definition of democracy. But still, could you think of anything that what is the definition of a good democracy? What should be done in a good democracy and what should not be done in a good democracy? That has to be done by yourself. You have to decide for yourself, by yourself, about a good definition of democracy, your own recipe for political reforms. So we can say that that is all we have discussed in this chapter. Now I've discussed all the topics and subtopics, and also this is the last chapter of this work. After this, our political science has been completed, and soon I'll start the geography of this class. So thank you very much.